Welcome back to part 2 of our conversation with Joe Williams, where he tells us why stage fright is actually a good thing for public speakers, as well as why volunteering can be your ticket to landing the job you want. Stick around. Part 2 is coming up next.
Welcome to this edition of Peak Performers Podcast
with your host, Thor Conklin.
Thor will be sharing the necessary tools, strategies, and psychology you'll need to become a peak performer in any area of your life or business.
Thor Conklin here. We give you the tricks, the tips, the tools, the strategy, the technology, and the psychology peak performers use in order to get more done and execute at the highest level. If you know what to do but struggle with getting it all done, or simply want to raise your game to the next level, this podcast is for you. Sit back and enjoy. You had the opportunity for years to spend time with an amazing individual that most people know, Tony Robbins. Yep. You were his head trainer up until 2014. You got to know him in the very beginning when you were in his living room in 1993.
Yeah, for all practical purposes, yep.
What was it like, first of all, back then? What was it like spending time with such an amazing individual? There's somebody that does not play on the same field that most people do.
Yeah, absolutely. And getting to know Tony, in those days absolutely was a good example of what we've been talking about, Thor. I mean, I was right place, right time. Truthfully, I was volunteering. I'd attended some seminars, and I had the opportunity to be invited back to go back on a small volunteer group that was going to help out at live events. And I just happened to be placed as a mic runner. I was a, thin, young, early 20s guy. I was an ultra runner in those days. And so, I was a good fit for running microphones around a big ballroom and so forth. And as it worked out, we bumped into each other backstage a couple of times and little bits here and there. And he noticed I was always smiling from ear to ear, and it wasn't a put on or show. It just was an expression of who I was. And it was some of the early days when he was starting to really start getting large crowds, different places. And so I was one of the people who kind of help out and usher him from place to place. He has full security detail now, obviously. But in those days, we just kind of make sure he got some food on breaks and things like that. And so he and I started talking. That's how we got to know each other. And so it was quite a ride because, as you said, I mean, it was from the time, to give you an idea, he was 31, 32 years old. Up until we're still friends. We usually talk a couple of times a year, sometimes just via email and so forth because of our schedules and so forth. But it's been all along throughout that entire time, and learned an enormous amount from him, and had some good times as well as friends.
It's interesting. Right place, right time.
Yeah.
Fit, and what can I give?
Yes.
What can I give?
Yeah.
I volunteered. Yeah. Okay, I didn't go to him and say, okay, I want a job. How much are you going to pay me? I need something from you. It's what can I give? That's the way you get into these environments. Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that opened itself up when he did his very first international trips. The place where we really started spending time together was when he started doing international events. Went to the UK, Europe, Asia, Australia, and so forth for the first times. I was part of a small four-person hit squad, they called us, to go in and back him up at these 2, 3, 4, 5,000 person events in countries he'd never been into before. And so that's really where we got to know each other. And then you took over Wealth Mastery?
I did. I started speaking for him actually at Wealth Mastery in 1998. And also doing some business events. So corporate type things that for whatever reason he was not able to do. They were smaller companies, smaller crowds and things. For years I did those as well.
Yeah, but then it got pretty big. I mean, you were the guy on stage. Tony wasn't there. You're the guy on stage. It was 3,000-4,000 people in San Francisco when I was there. Yeah. What was it like? What was the process that he was giving you his stage?
Yes.
He doesn't do that very easily.
No.
What was that process like? Who did you have to become in order to accomplish that?
Well, at the most basic level, it started off in those early days of learning all the skills that he used of just personal transformation, and then bringing those out and applying them to organizations and so forth. There was all of that skill based stuff. I had to find my own rhythm, for sure, as a speaker, as for presentations, as a person really leading, the way we viewed ourselves. I'll speak for myself. He may have a different way of saying this, but certainly for myself, we viewed ourselves as leaders of that group of people. If it were 50, if it were 500, if it were 5,000, for the period of time that we had the microphone and the front of the room, for lack of a better term, and all of the support mechanisms and infrastructure that went with that, we viewed ourselves as the leaders in that case. And preparation would start weeks and sometimes months in advance for certain events. And they would then on site, obviously, they become a 24/7 marathon. My adventure racing and ultra running and all of that background that I did for years. Obviously, you've been doing some of that as well, dude.
Yeah.
I learned very quickly about endurance and multiple day races. That kind of lended itself over to that when I was doing a lot of that. But that was kind of the story of that, and the having the physical vitality and energy and being able to be on all the time as we were in those events. And so in addition to just the learning and the living, not just learning, living the material. I mean, back when I was teaching wealth mastery, as you recall, we were teaching certain investment strategies. I wasn't, because I'm not a licensed broker, but we had people that were teaching them. But even though I was shepherding the entire event, I forced myself to use and learn and get in there and do momentum day trading with options and stocks and things like that. And we taught it all over the world, so I had to be adept at all the different ins and outs of the legal systems in every country that we went to, what you could say, what you couldn't say, and so forth. So I liked it because it kept me on the forefront of an arena of my life that I really thought and still do I'm a big fan of, and that is our abundance, our prosperity, and the ability to use it for ultimate good, not just to create just a quality of life for ourselves and those we love, but ultimately to have it be a tool for bettering the planet in some way as a result of our time being around.
Joe, you and I have had the opportunity to see what Tony does behind stage in preparation to go out on stage.
Yeah.
And you just mentioned that you start weeks ahead of time training and being prepared to go on stage. And that's something that Tony does as well. And when he's done with the events, he then spends, 2 or 3 hours after the event debriefing it and figuring out how to make it better. Yep. Explain to the audience what that pre-routine looks like, and why would somebody that does this probably 100 times prepare like this?
Yeah. Well, so let's use that as an example. Let's take, Wealth Mastery, Date with Destiny, Leadership Academy. Those are all events that I led. Platinum partnership events, things like that for Tony. We would start routinely the preparation from a material standpoint, usually on average a few weeks, pretty heavily in advance, depending, again, upon the country we were going to and the year in which it was, because I did that over the span of, over a decade that I led the Wealth Mastery course, specifically a Date with Destiny. But then hardcore, our physical preparation would usually start several days in advance, because there are certain things that take time to assimilate into your body, the physical aspect. So hydration, safe nutrition, where you're not going to be eating something that might not agree with you, or where you might have a chance of getting food poisoning or something like that. We really limited those risks down to a bare minimum, so that we could be, especially when traveling internationally and so forth, really be on the entire time. And then the mental preparation as well starts hardcore days in advance. But to a smaller extent, usually weeks in advance. And it's if you're gonna play a game that big and go full on 16, 18 hours a day for 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 days on end, as we did some of our events, you got to put in the work before time to be ready for it.
And Tony, even if he's doing a date with Destiny for the 100th time, he's still doing this. It's not like it's new material. I mean, you and I could almost tell what the next words are going to be coming out of his mouth, right? Because we've seen it so many times. But yet he still spends all that time.
Yeah. It's, I think I can certainly say the way I feel about it, the way I felt and feel about it. And that is that the people that are coming, in many cases, are coming for the first time. And so we owe it 100% freshness, newness, and just like it was done that the very first time we did it, that energy, that enthusiasm. We've all seen speakers and people who give presentations often who seem stale and who just seem like they're repeating the same thing they've said 100 times before. And, I always used examples, in some cases from theater. Sir Laurence Olivier was known as being one of the people who, even if he did plays hundreds of times, was still very fresh. And one of the reasons is because he would actually sneak out right before the show would begin and peek out from behind the curtain and look around at the people filtering into the audience and into the theater that night. And he would imagine to himself what they must have given up or what their sacrifice had been to be there that night. In other words, what did they have at stake for this big night out in the theater in London? And he would cause himself literally to get to the point where he would start to feel stage fright. That's when he knew he was ready to keep it fresh and keep it new. He would physically induce stage fright into himself. As you know, I'm a big fan of it. I think that you never want to lose it completely. Obviously, you want to learn how to mitigate it. It's a lot of the work I do with people. Mitigate it down to where it doesn't trip you up or stumble you in some way, where it is insurmountable. You don't want that, but you do want a certain amount of the nervous energy every time you get up to speak. And I still have it to this day.
Many of the people listening today are entrepreneurs and they don't want to be public speakers, but they realize that they have to become better communicators. And in 2001, you started working in the aerospace area and you were helping large aerospace companies win, in some cases, billion-dollar contracts. And you were taking the tech guys, the coders, the
engineers,
the engineers, and saying, okay, let's make these guys presentable. Bring us through that process, and what did you learn, and what can the listeners take away from this of some of the things that they can help their team to implement?
Yeah. Well, I actually got pulled into that industry quite by chance. It was by a gentleman who was a client of mine, and I had been working with him on his presentation skills. And he said, well, have you ever tried teaching engineers to give presentations? Because, boy, they can be really dry and technical and boring. And so I said, no, let's give it a run. And we did with a situation where the client at the time, big international airplane and space company that people would know the name of for sure. They fly on their airplanes every day that they travel. Was going after a satellite contract with the federal government, and they were going to lose. We were brought in because they were going to lose. On paper, the design that they had submitted for this weather satellite system was overpriced and it didn't accomplish everything that it was supposed to accomplish. And so the only choice we had was to make the humans collectively into the team that the federal selection committee would believe in and want to do business with long term. This was something that was going to play out over the course of 10 years after the award of the contract. So we wanted to make sure these are the humans that they want to work with. It was our only chance to win. That's what we did. That became our hallmark of all the work that we did in that industry. And really at the time kind of revolutionized that whole industry in a major way. Not for every company, but we worked with all the big ones. And that was really the secret. So I really believe that's even more germane today in the area of business, to further answer your question, that it's even more important today than it has ever been. We live in a time of, as I said, transparency, and where a rock star CEO can do something and have that they even do personally, and have the stock of the company skyrocket just based on their outstanding personal nature, or them being a role model in some arena or some area. The same is true in reverse, obviously, as we see in the news all the time of scandals and things like that, where it's not the company per se who has done something, but the individual. Something is found out about them personally in this age that we live in that never would have been 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. Yet we live in a time where people are looking to that leader in business to be a leader in every area of their life. And an ability to communicate powerfully, compellingly, inspirationally is now more important than it's ever been for leaders in business.
What do you think? Well, let me say this. I think there's a genuine lack of great leadership in the business community today. Now, there's obviously the standouts.
Sure.
What do you think most people are missing that's preventing them from being a great leader?
Well, I think, first of all, I think an awareness of some of what we're talking about here, which is that they are more under a microscope today than they've really ever been. And certainly if a person's been in a position of business leadership for 20, 30, 40 years, I see it all the time with potential clients and others, that they forget the age in which we live in, and they're still living like they did in 1985, thinking nobody's going to find out. And that's not the world we live in anymore. So an awareness of that. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Actually, a different slant on it. Not the ones that aren't doing what needs to be done, but the ones that they're not stepping up. They're the tan, right? They're just, you don't even know they're there. There's just no strength to their leadership. You don't even know they're there, that group. Because I see it all the time.
Yeah, and I think it's somewhat of the same. I think it's somewhat of the same that we were just talking about, in that people are being called upon in those positions to continue to step up their game continually, to sharpen their own personal skill set and become better and better and better. Where a lot of people, I think, that play the game the way you're talking about is they got to a certain point and then they just kind of go on autopilot and they continue to cruise along at that beige or vanilla or whatever it was you called it, way of being, rather than continually challenging themselves, putting themselves out there, stepping up, and also using all of the platforms for communication that we have available to us today that we can use as leaders to get out there and be on the forefront of being inspirations, and getting an inspirational message in our area of expertise or authority, getting that out there more aggressively and more actively, not just kind of sitting back and passively doing a job, but making an aspect of our own personal definition of our quote unquote job description to be a champion for the industry and the industry that I am in, and get out there and be a voice of inspiration, a voice of leadership, a voice of greatness as someone within this specific area of expertise that I have. And, I don't care. I work with, people that are dentists or who are lawyers or who are, all kinds of different heating and plumbing contractors. I mean, all kinds of different businesses. And the one commonality is we really get them out there and make them leaders within their respective genre.
Yeah, it's about stepping up and taking a stand.
Yes.
Being congruent and taking a stand for something and then not wavering.
Yes.
And I see so much wavering in order to be politically correct or just, not rock the boat. And it's just nobody respects that. Their teams are just looking at them going, ugh.
Yeah. Now more than ever, you've got to be able to take a firm and a well-spoken, a well-presented line of thought behind the stand that you're willing to take. Yeah. It's not just enough to stand up and pound your chest and declare something, and then slink off into the shadows, to then come back with the flavor of the week to then declare something else. You've got to be able to put some, intelligent and hopefully, as I said, eloquent, inspirational communication behind it as well, to give a reason why.
Yeah. It's amazing the reaction that I have from my clients that when I am just brutally honest and speak my mind and use the language that I want to, it's amazing the response back from it. They're not getting that in other areas. And it's there's a lot of hand holding I see and not enough of just, that behavior is not acceptable or this is what's acceptable and here's the standard. And if you can't get there, we're going to help you get there as a team. We're going to do this together. A lot of the stuff I did with the Navy SEALs a couple of years ago, I was the old guy that was on the back of the line. I was the one dragging the team down, so to speak. But at some point during that 3-day, hell, it's not hell week, but hell 3 days, I had to grab somebody by the hand. I was grabbing the young recruit. So it all switches, but it's about I just keep coming back to standard. And I think if more people set a standard of this is what I will do and this is what I won't do, I think they get to where they want to go a lot further and a lot faster.
Yeah. And you have an absolute point. Obviously, we see it in everything from the news and media to politics and all sorts of things. That right now we are living in a time where, hey, at least tell me what you stand for, and and don't be wishy-washy milquetoast washing all over the place. Again, now more than ever, that is appreciated, and it's what's called for. Yeah. It's what's called for in this age.
If you're not getting the results you want and need, I guarantee no one's holding you accountable. Now, let's face it, who really wants to be held accountable? Not me, right? Nobody. Why would you want to be held accountable? It's not part of our nature. However, if you want to get exceptional results, you must be held accountable. For $95 a month, our team will hold you accountable to those goals that you want to accomplish in any given month. If you don't like it, ask for your money back. But truly, if you're not getting the results, it's because no one's holding you accountable. The only question is, are you willing to step up?
Keep an eye out for part 3 of our interview with Joe, where he tells us why adding a 0 to what you charge can change the way you do business permanently. In addition to Joe's 3 tips for public speaking. See you next time on Peak Performers Podcast.